let's get going. And I want to show you, kind of like last time, I've got a whole bunch of random things that I'm working on. So I'm going to show you, if we get to it, the way that I paint black armor. I've got some samurai miniatures, some sci-fi miniatures, a little vehicle thing over here that needs to get painted. So lots going on, and I think it's going to be fantastic. Just got to check that stream, sorry, because sometimes it drops and you never know when exactly. Okay, that's going perfect. So here we go. Alright, first up, I've got some of these that I've been sitting on for a really long time and they need to be done. So I'm working on a Legend of the Five Rings game, and while it's set in Rokugan, the game is probably going to be either Rangers of Shadow Deep or the L5R RPG, just adapted to miniatures and tabletop, and I'm excited about that. Not sure exactly how it's going to go, so I need to do a lot of play testing, and I just know it's going to be awesome because I really love that setting. So tonight we're going to paint her. I got a whole bunch more samurai that just came off the printer, so I need to assemble those, give them bases, and prime them. This is an old Clan War miniature. If you just look at it without any paint on it, it looks terrible. It did not age well since the mid-90s. I think in 1997 this came out. But with some contrast, some light and dark contrast, this guy still looks pretty good, all things considered. Yeah. And then painted, this is what they look like. That's one of my unicorn samurai. And then I've got the crab samurai. I think this character is actually Hide Yakumo from the game. So we're going to paint up these two. And then, I never remember what this is called. It's Studio McVeigh game. Got some extra miniatures laying around that I'm going to use for Operation Last Train, and some more sci-fi type RPGs. And then this one, that's just been hanging out in my to-do pile for about 5 years. So, time to get her finished too. Alright. Oh, and then this guy. He's part of the Studio McVeigh game. He needs a Zenithal highlight. Let me show you that, actually, the Zenithal highlight. Top secret project over here. I need to get more these paint handles. These are awesome. I need way more of them than I have. Game Grid has a ton. So if you don't have enough, if you don't have like 20 of them, you probably don't have enough. Go grab some. I need to do some Zenithal highlighting. So the reason that I do Zenithal highlighting on everything, partly is so that I can see what's what on the miniature. I can tell what's going on, what the details are, where they separate from each other. I can see if there's any like mistakes that I need to address in the sculpting, which it looks like there are. 90% sure you're not going to be able to see that. Oh, maybe you will be able to. Yeah, guy's arm right here. Apparently as I was assembling him, I missed this. So you should be able to see right here, going all the way down, there's a line. That's a mold line, and I don't want that on there at all. So I'm going to scrape it off. I did not see it in assembly because it's teeny. And I can only see it from one angle, but now having paint on it, it's showing up pretty well. So this is one way that you can clean things. This type of plastic kind of reminds me of like maybe a more resin variant of the WizKids stuff that's out right now. Like if you cut it right, it kind of comes off like string cheese, where the Games Workshop stuff is more flaky when you get into it. I have no idea how their chemical compositions are different. I just know what it's like to cut into them. The other way is to take your knife like this and then scrape. Whoops, he's popping out of the holder. Take your knife and scrape away like you're shaving. That usually removes a lot. And sometimes I'm nervous to do that. I usually won't do that with resin miniatures because it kind of makes a dust and the resin is nasty. But on plasticky guys, the harder the plastic, the better that works. So on Games Workshop miniatures, that method works fantastic. It goes really fast. And I think that mold line is mostly off of him. So I'm going to have to retouch that primer just a little bit. So grab my airbrush. I've been using the AK Interactive primer. Game Grid can order this stuff for you. This is awesome. It is the most matte primer that I've ever used. I really like it. And I think this bottle is going to last me a really long time. I was using the Vallejo stuff for a while, but that Vallejo stuff kept betraying me and coming out in flakes and messing up the airbrush and just not working out as well as I wanted it to. So I like the AK Interactive stuff. So I'm just going to do the touch-up real fast, mixing some thinner. I try not to use, normally I use this stuff, distilled water, for most of my airbrushing of acrylics, but I've been using the Vallejo's airbrush thinner for this particular stuff because it seems to work a lot better with the thicker, the more pigmented paint and the thicker binders that the AK Interactive primer uses. So we'll reprime that area that we cut. Then I'm just going to apply some air only to try to dry this. Look at it again. It looks pretty good. I don't see any more mold lines, so I'm going to give it one more coat. Then let that dry. And while that's drying, clean out the airbrush. And then I'm going to go back to the airbrush, switch colors, and go to my white ink. White ink is kind of my go-to for so many different things. I like that the ink gives you a lot more particles, so smaller particles, than using spray paint or airbrush paint. Normal acrylic paint through the airbrush kind of can be speckly sometimes, but using the ink it goes on a lot smoother. So okay, if you haven't, if you're new, my name is Michael, and I own Slayer of Monster, and we have an event every year called Battlehaven. I've been painting miniatures, converting miniatures, building things, playing games since I was about 11 or 12. I don't really remember exactly when it was, except I walked into my friend's front room one Saturday, and a couple other of our friends were there. They didn't tell me that they were meeting. We were meeting up to play laser tag or something, back when you could play laser tag and shoot guns in the front yard and stuff. So I went over, and they were just finishing up a game of Warhammer 40,000, Orcs against Space Marines, with the second edition rules. That starter box had a whole bunch of cardboard miniatures in it, and I was hooked. I had no idea what the game was or what it was about, and I'd played with like plastic army men and stuff, just the green army men, coming up with rules for them and different ways to roll dice and have them move across the table and stuff, without knowing what I was doing before being introduced to Warhammer. But being introduced to that game kind of sunk me, and I was over my head in the hobby ever since then. So I've painted a ton of stuff. I worked for a painting studio for a number of years, doing a ton of projects. I've painted probably 10,000 miniatures, and of all different genres, all different companies, all different sizes. I've learned a ton of stuff, and I want to share that with you. One of the things that's been most useful to me has been Zenithal priming. So one of my mentors named Joseph, he'd always say, sitting down with him to paint, working on projects, he would always say, Mike, you can paint what you see, or you can paint what you think you see. And it took me a long time to figure out what he was talking about. What he meant was we don't really see with our eyes, we see with our brains. So light images come into our eyeballs, and we have to interpret that information. That's what our brain sees, is stuff that's in front of us, and it filters out a whole bunch of things, it simplifies a whole bunch of things, and sometimes it makes things more complicated than they need to be. But we really see and understand and process with our brains, not with our eyes. So you can paint what you think you see, what your brain tells you you see, and usually it's going to come out mediocre at best. Or you can paint what you actually see, what your eyes are perceiving, and not what your brain tells you you're perceiving. So I'm going to talk about that a lot because it's kind of a deep concept. But essentially, you need a ton of contrast, you need a ton of different colors mixing together, and you need to paint. It's like slow down and paint what you see. For example, if I pick up, I don't know, we'll just use this. If I pick up this bottle and I ask you, what color is this? Whoops. Like, what color is this bottle here? You'd say, it's blue. Yeah, but that's what your brain tells you. That's what you think you see, that this bottle is blue. What you actually see is some indigo, some violet, a lot of black actually, and there's a ton of white in the reflections on the lights. So if you're painting this bottle, if you want to do it in little kid mode, you can just pick up your paints and paint the thing blue, or you can do some extra work and put on a whole bunch of shadows and a whole bunch of highlights and paint what you actually see, what is reality, and you'll get a much more detailed and convincing result than if you just start slapping colors on whatever your brain tells you see. So this is not actually blue. There's like giant insects flying outside my window. There's a whole bunch of other colors in here if you were actually going to paint it. But when we say this is blue, we're talking about the local color. So you hear me talk about local color a lot. Local color is the color that an object is when it's not under direct light and when it's not in like deep shadows. It's just the color of the thing. So the local color is blue, and we would add a whole bunch of stuff to it. So in order to cheat the system and speed things up, I do a Zenithal priming or Zenithal highlighting using an airbrush. So I spray this guy black all over the place, especially underneath, making sure to get all the little nooks and crannies. Then, so that I can see what is going on, I want to get it to something like this stage. So you can see there's black underneath, meaning my shadows are already painted on for me. And if I just apply lighter colors on the top and let the paint and gravity work as they're designed, the translucent nature of the paint is going to do a lot of the work for me, and I'll be able to paint a whole bunch of things really fast. So here we go. Ink. Whenever you're using inks, they tend to separate really quick, so you kind of have to mix them up like every minute or so. So So lightly, I'm going to apply paint across the top, going from generally one direction. And I'm trying to bring out the details of this piece. So I want to be able to see what I'm painting. And I want to add a lighter color to this, so not black. Because if I'm going to paint any of this white or gray or yellow or red or orange, those colors, even blue, doesn't really go over black very well. You got to do a ton of coats. So, and then you got to worry about the consistency of your paint and how even it is, and just kind of a pain. But I find if you use an airbrush and do a Zenithal highlight really quick, just going from, generally speaking, one direction, like the top, most of those details will be picked out for you. So I'm not spraying the whole thing white, I'm just spraying the top of it white, or I'm spraying it white from the top, which is going to give me a whole bunch of nice shadows, so I don't have to paint any on. It's going to add my value, my light and dark contrast, right at the beginning, so I don't have to worry about that. All I've got to worry about then is applying color and saturation instead of applying value, which usually takes a ton of time. Now, it can, generally speaking, look a lot better if you take the time to paint up your values. You can go back in. I'll often go back in after I'm done using this technique to kind of speed paint something. So I'll go back in and pick out more of the details that I want to pop a little bit more. But generally speaking, you can paint a ton of stuff really fast. I want the focal point to be his face, because our eyes are naturally drawn to human faces. So I'm going to paint that a little bit wider. I know that I want these little armor pieces and his watch to be brighter. I'm going to paint those a little bit brighter. I want some visual interest, some added visual interest on that backpack, and then this little coil right here. I also want to be a little bit brighter. I'm going to add more white to that. Because right now, while this looks white, it's actually very gray. Like there's a lot of dark tones in it still. So I'm going to add more white ink and improve the value. Looks like he's not wearing a shirt, so I'm going to kind of add some more here. Get that hand. Alright, that's pretty good. Then this thing, how much white ink do I have? I got enough. This robot is mostly going to be white, so I'm going to do the same thing to him. He's not glued in on the bottom, so he kind of wobbles a little bit, which is just fine for right now. You can see, I hope, how smooth that transition is compared to paint. If I was airbrushing paint instead of ink, it would be very messy and speckly, but that's pretty smooth, all things considered. So I just took a second to mix up my paint again, or mix up the ink, because I told you that those pigments separate really quickly when you put in a thinner. And I want this to be fairly bright. So I'm going to go through this a couple of times and add a whole bunch of layers to this so that I get a very bright effect. Very bright and even effect. And then I'm going to go through and weather it up and change a bunch of stuff. I'm still not going to paint it from underneath because I do want those shadows preserved. But more than the shadows, I want this to look like it's like a bright white road, like R2D2 kind of style. one of the keys to painting with an airbrush is to always keep the brush moving, the flow of paint moving. You can do that by rotating the model or by keeping the airbrush moving. Because anytime that you stop with the airbrush, you'll start to pool. Your paint will start to pool and it'll start to look weird, and you'll get like crusty spots where the paint is starting to dry. I think I'm running out of ink. Yep, I'm running out of ink. So we'll go through the rest of this real fast. And I'm going to let this ink kind of cure on the model for a little bit as I move back to painting the rest of these guys. And maybe we'll have a chance to paint this guy, this robot tonight, maybe not. But I need him for one of these scenarios that I'm working on in a couple of days. Alright, that's airbrush empty. So that's all the airbrushing that I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to use some distilled water to clean out the airbrush. Maintenance when you're using an airbrush is key. You never want your paint to sit in the reservoir and dry out. So I've got an old paintbrush and I'm just putting some water in there and kind of stirring it around, and I got to clean out the airbrush. A lot of people will dump this. I used to do it. So now that I've got this reservoir full, I used to just dump it into my water, have a separate cup. But I'm kind of too lazy now, so I'll just spray it out into my little reservoir. I got a little reservoir here that is just, it's like a trash can for airbrushes. So it just collects water and thinner and old paint, and then I empty it out every couple of days, clean it. It's good to go again. The sound of the airbrush changes when you run out or when the reservoir is empty. So you can hear it when it's time to move on to the next step. Kind of makes a hissing sound. A different hissing sound than this. Because this is basically a hissing sound too. Alright. Then if I'm not using the airbrush for a while, the last thing I'll use is some Windex or some whatever not Windex brand that's cheaper. Just to make sure that I've got all the paint off and that any weird chemicals are kind of neutralized. And after I run a couple of shakes of Windex through it, then I'll do one more squirt of distilled water, and that one should go pretty quickly, showing me that the airbrush is clean. This also cleans the needle pretty well, running the Windex through it. If I'm using enamels or oil paints, then I'll use one of those thinners, either like a white spirit or a paint thinner or something, just to make sure that there's no paint on the needle. Then last shot of distilled water and the airbrush will be clean. So turn off the airbrush, get the rest of that out, and we're done with the airbrush for a while. I used to have a hard time painting with the airbrush for more than a couple of minutes because my compressor would get really hot. Then it'd stop working very well. It wouldn't hold, it developed leaks and weird stuff. So I put 2 fans coming from different directions on the airbrush, and now I can paint for hours without any hassle, without the airbrush overheating. It's awesome. Okay, put away the inks very carefully. I don't need the paint thinner or the airbrush thinner. I might need some of this distilled water, and I definitely need a new paper towel. Keep a stack of paper towels close by. I fold them in half and then in half again. like double hot dog style. Then you're ready to go. Usually I'll put the water cup on the top of that. I think my water is starting to get a little low. I've been painting for a while, but I haven't done very many metallics or anything else. It's weird, so I'll just fill it up. Don't do that. Just clean it. Toss your water, get new stuff. It's just weird if I walk away in the middle of the show. So I've got this brush that I've been using for kind of my workhorse. It's a size 3. This used to be my workhorse. It's a size 6, and then I started using it for oil paints, and now it's all kind of crusty. So that's just my oil painting brush. And then this is the Army Painter. I don't know what size it is, but it's a Warhammer character. It's probably size 1 or something. I've been using that for my fine details. And it's awesome. Let's paint the unicorn characters for Legend of the Five Rings first. Rokugan. Hope I'm not getting the right amount of light on that miniature. I don't know, maybe that just made it worse. Okay. I've got a reference photo on my laptop, so we're going to add a lot of purples and a lot of light purples, some really deep purples, and then the armor that looks like is a mix of purple, black, and gold. So let's see. That feels a little bit too dark to me. That'll be fine. No, I want it brighter. Gonna change it again. Now I've got a lot of miniatures. This will be fine. I'll just paint the next one in that brighter color. Okay, no more messing around. L5R, just Google L5R art or character or something, and you'll come up with days of cool samurai art. It's awesome. Check it out. And then if you want to play the game, let me know, because I need some play testers. So it looks like I need a very light kind of pastel purple for her belt. Keep your brush wet, not wet, damp. So I dunk it in the water, and then I'll touch it here and kind of preserve the point. And I don't want any water on the ferrule, on the metal part here, because that's going to be a bad day. Then this is Games Workshop's Druchii Violet. Pick that up at your friendly local game store. And then, actually, I'm going to switch brushes. I don't use small brushes for small things. I use small brushes like this, yeah, sometimes for detail stuff, but for getting into tight spaces, where if I was using this larger brush, I would hit like on the edges of things, and then I'm painting stuff that I don't want to be painted. So use a smaller brush for accuracy, not for painting smaller things. Using smaller brushes takes a way longer time than using bigger brushes. Your brain will go crazy if you're trying to use a small brush to paint a regular size model. It is not going to work out very well for you. Just find the largest size brush that you're comfortable with, and then go up like 2 or 3 sizes from that. That's the brush you should be using most of the time. So with these Citadel paints, the shades and the contrast paints and stuff that I'm going to use tonight, it's important to paint quickly, because these paints dry really quickly. They don't like cure really quick, but they dry enough so that there's kind of a lip of paint And then if you go back over it like 30 seconds later even and try to continue painting the same object, you'll hit that lip, and then your paint is going to not want to blend, and it's going to react badly. It's just going to turn out looking gross. You may have like a line of dried paint across your miniature, and nobody wants that. So paint quick. Don't poke with your brush. I find a lot of people poke with the brush. There is a time and a place definitely for poking for a stippling type effect, but use your brush as a brush. You want to use the full length of those bristles and guide the paint into where it needs to be. Okay, so I got first layer done with purple. And it looks like that is much darker on camera than I've got here. So yeah, that's a little better. Looks a little bit more pastel to my eyes than it does on camera. A little bit more pastel, and maybe not quite so saturated as it appears on camera. Anyways, let's see. All of her straps need to be purple. So I'm going off of this character art for the game. The character is called Utaku Kamoko. Kamoko. Spoiler alert, she is the Unicorn Thunder. Okay. Most samurai miniatures have a whole bunch of little straps all over the place. And I like painting them. It kind of breaks up the what could be monotony of having like a whole bunch of just armored plates and stuff. I gotta adjust my painting position a little bit. So I like having them. I think they're cool. The only problem is they're kind of teeny, and there's a lot of them. I don't want you just looking at the top of my head. That's not exciting. Maybe for a little bit, but it'd be cool if we had a sponsor. Then I could shave like codes, discount codes into my head. You'd have to watch the stream to get the discount code. Someday, if anyone's watching and wants to sponsor this, let me know. So I'm not being too careful about my accuracy at this point because I'm going to paint the cloth more purple, like a deep purple. So getting some medium tone or light purple on the cloth isn't going to matter very much, and the rest of the armor is going to be a mix of purple and black, so it's not going to show up either if I make a mistake, as long as my mistake isn't egregious. Yeah, that's all purple. Painting these little lines underneath her arm. Straps everywhere. Holy cow. There's a ton. I guess they're not really straps, they're cords. Still, there's a lot of these guys. Got that on the front. Paint it on the back. Then we'll do right here on the shoulders. And I should have probably painted her face before doing this part. If there's any details that come in close together, I like to paint the ones that are more noticeable first. So usually that's any areas of exposed skin or any areas where there's weapons and stuff, because little buttons or anything that's in a sci-fi. Because if I paint, if I'm painting the small details, then it creates a little, I already told you, when this paint dries, it leaves kind of a very small lip. So if you're painting over a flat surface, that can be kind of a problem. But if you're painting small details, having that extra lip, it is so small, but when your brush is pressed down against the miniature and you're drawing it along, that extra lip seems to help guide the bristles away from things that you've already painted, and it keeps you painting inside the lines. It's not that way for every paint, but this Games Workshop paint does that a lot. So, blessing in disguise. Let's do this purple too. That little wrap on the weapon, on the spear. She got anything in her hair that I can paint? Yeah, right there. Right in the middle. Okay, got it. So that's done for the most part. Now I need the deep purple of the clothes. Make sure these are all the way closed whenever you close them, because everybody leaves them open. And then they make huge mistakes, and it's bad. It looks like... It almost looks like there's a little bit of a piece of flash or something. So I'm looking at her face. A piece of flash or something on this side of her mouth. It kind of looks like a mustache. Yeah, I think you can see it. It's not going to focus very well, but I think you can see the shadow. So before I paint her face, I gotta fix that. I think it's attached to her nose, so I think it's just a little flake of metal. But I need like a file, or bust out that knife again. I'm not gonna do it right now. I gotta fix that before I paint the face. Okay, Mike, fix that before you paint the face. Somebody remind me. Then let's move on to the rest of the armor. Looks like most of her armor plates are black, and then that armor is alternating black and purple, and the cords are gold. So we're going to paint the gold cords first. And for that, I'm going to use one of my favorite colors. It is Citadel Aggro Stones. It's really yellow. Okay, side note, because I'm getting distracted now. Gouache and oil paints are awesome. This guy was painted, so was right, his gun's not finished yet. This guy was painted using acrylics, so like these Games Workshop washes and stuff. And then I had finished him up, and I decided that he was really dark, so I wanted to put some orange and yellow spots on him and some white. Normally, orange over black, I already told you it doesn't work very well because the orange is really translucent and it has a hard time getting enough coverage or being saturated enough to show up. But using gouache over those acrylics, that's one coat of orange gouache. It's like vermilion or something, but it's orange. But one coat of that was pretty awesome. I was really very, very happy with the results of that gouache. And then there's some oils on here on his clothes, and I'll probably paint that gun using oils. And the base was done using oils and is not finished yet. I need to put the weathering powders and stuff on that bright pink, bright red grate. It's got a base coat of red primer on it, like 1942 German red primer. Then, yeah, it just needs to be rusted and stuff. Anyways, gouache and oil paints are awesome. I painted that guy last night. Forgot what I was doing. Oh yeah, so Aggro Stones. Just going to put a little bit on the palette, out of sight where you can't see it. Sorry, we'll get a solution for that soon. Okay, so all of her, these things, oh, that's going to be tricky. Okay, going into painting troll mode. Okay, that's yellow. So we'll just do the same thing everywhere. Sweet. Pick up a little bit more paint and keep going. I have found that the most intimidating part of painting is getting started. It's not picking up a brush, it's putting paint on a miniature. It seems like most people struggle with starting the process, and as soon as you start, not that it becomes easy, but it becomes easier to keep going. But man, getting started painting every day or in your hobby time, Netflix is like the bane of hobbyists. You will sink so much effort and so much time into Netflix. It's crazy. Or Amazon Prime or whatever your chosen streaming service is. Even just YouTube. Getting stuck in the YouTube vortex, that can be bad news too. which happened to me while I was researching some terrain to build a couple of days ago. I learned a ton about all the different people who have inhabited Japan. We tend to think that Japan is really homogeneous as far as like culturally. It's actually very diverse if you do research and look into the different cultural backgrounds, the different ethnicities of people that live on those islands, on the Japanese archipelago, which I didn't know till a couple of days ago. So here's another area where I'm kind of still using this size brush just because I was using it originally, or to paint stuff immediately before this, and sometimes it's a hassle to change your brush. So I'm still using it, but I could use any size brush as long as the point was sharp and collected, because all I'm using here is the tip of the brush. So anything would work, really, as long as that point was nice. It looks like, oh no, there's one more plate. I totally missed that one. Right there. Right there. Okay. I think I got them all. And it looks like her greaves. I know they're not called greaves. I don't remember what the Japanese word is. Her leg armor is going to be yellow with that gold color. So that's how I'm going to paint it from my reference. If I have enough time, I would like to go back over this miniature and paint the like these gold pieces, put some metallic paint on them, make them stand out just a little bit more. That can be gold. Looks like that's gold. I'm finding all of these gold parts on her. Okay, so the rest of her clothes are going to be purple. Shoes are going to be black. And her armor alternates between purple and black. Make sure you stretch regularly. Let's do the dark purple. This purple is really dark. like it's almost black. Yeah, I gotta thin that down. Too dark. Instead of thinning with water, if you're going to paint with it, the contrast medium works much better because it kind of maintains the contrast paint look a little bit more than just using water. Oh, that's so dark still. A little bit more. A little bit more. Hey, that's going to be good. I try not to mix things with my brush very often. If I'm going fast or I'm trying to teach somebody, I'll almost always mix the paints with my brush. So don't do what I do what I tell you to do. You'll have much better results than me. Looks like black is on the bottom. So the middle of all of these is going to be purple. So I'm painting the armor right now. Black is on the bottom, so the middle is going to be purple. The next one is purple. And the next one is purple. And here, black on the bottom, so purple, purple, and purple. And if you ever mess up, just clean your brush real fast, because the paint's not going to dry immediately, and then just touch your kind of dry brush to wherever you think you messed up, and the paint should, by capillary action, get pulled onto your brush. Then keep going. But whatever you do, don't freak out and don't stop painting. Especially if you're using like these contrast paints, because man, they dry so fast. Comparatively. And then another issue that I've seen people have with the contrast paints is they don't put them on thick enough. So there's not enough paint to like separate and go into the shadows and do its thing. Starting to think this was not the right color choice. That I should have used that lighter purple that I was using before to just paint all of this stuff purple. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work very well right now. We'll see. The worst that could happen is I paint over it. Also 90% sure that I'm going to bust off this spear. I have hit this thing so many times. Just turn on that miniature. One of the things that I use if weapons are getting knocked off is brass rod. Brass rod works really well to replace either like thin plastic pieces or metal pieces, because the metal is just cast tin, some other stuff in there, but it's mostly just like really soft metal. brass is much harder, so you'll get much better strength results by using brass rod instead of whatever this stuff is. And I buy brass rod at my local, sorry I'm moving this out of frame, kind of closer to my face, so I can be a little bit more accurate with it. See it a little better at my train supply shop, train supply store. Okay, that's going to be purple, so let's hit that. And unicorn, apparently your clothing color just changed because I painted this in a purple color. I'm not going to put two purples next to each other. So your clothing color is now black. Yeah, you now have black clothes instead of purple clothes. So doing her armor, purple. Looks like that's about it. Now for the black. I'm going to use actually black Templar for her clothes. Or, sorry, for her armor. And I meant I'm going to use Flesh Tear's Red for her clothes. Instead of black. Come on, camera, focus. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to repaint this. It's looking a little bit off, a little bit too dark. Still, we'll continue on and paint the whole thing. But I think that purple color that I chose earlier was too dark, too close to black. I'm not getting quite the saturation out of this that I had wanted before. So maybe I'll look at my gouache, my oils, my super saturated paints, see if there's some way that I can fix this later on. But barring that, I'm not going to spray it over. I'm just going to airbrush it white again on the these armor parts. And then just do lighter purple for the whole thing. Which probably wouldn't be the worst thing at this point. Sorry, I know I'm out of frame, but I'm getting into the weird area on this miniature between the models, like leg and where this spear is. I'm trying to be accurate with the paint, not slosh it around everywhere. So, it don't look too bad. Let's see how the rest of this turns out. Actually, this might be okay if I can put another wash on here to darken up some of these areas without getting into the black again. I think this might work out. Looks like we've got all that armor done. Except for right there. Then she's going to have... Yeah, as that dries, it's going to get more matte and potentially a little bit more saturated. So again, I don't know. We'll see. The other side. Black, black, more black. All right. Then let's get some red on that. Or I guess we could do the purple on the shoulders first. Come on. All right. Holy cow, that was kind of a little bit of a stressful situation more than I wanted it to be. So this is Flesh Tear's red. Just one spot of that. All right. We're going to do all of her clothes. So it looks like she's wearing gloves. Again, this is where I like the accurateness of these smaller brushes as opposed to the faster painting and more carrying capacity of the larger brushes. I'm doing something small. I'm going to try to not have to go over it and paint it twice. Because if you make a mistake, it's not bad. Everybody makes mistakes. They happen all the time. But if you don't make mistakes, then your painting really picks up speed. that same guy that I mentioned earlier, Joseph, taught me a ton of things about painting. I was working on a project and I asked him, well, what happens if I make a mistake? And he said, don't make a mistake. Like, I was in control of everywhere the brush moves. Imagine that. Okay, cool. This is going to work out. It is way highly saturated right now. Way more than I want. But as it dries, it'll get a little bit darker. And I can go over it with some black to give to tone it down a little bit. And I think it's going to be awesome. I can hear crying kids upstairs. So if I have to run really fast, it's because there's some kind of situation that I need to take care of. Woo! These are some teeny tiny spaces. The miniatures are awesome, but some parts of them are crazy detailed. Just gotta go way slow, be really accurate. Dang, like right there. That is small. Underneath her arm. Yeah, you guys can barely see it. Ooh. Small details. So sometimes, after I paint a piece like this, I'll switch to speed painting a whole bunch of stuff. Because when I say speed painting, I don't mean that I'm trying to go fast. I mean, like, I'm just using the washes and oils and stuff to paint kind of as quickly as possible while still giving me at least like a tabletop standard kind of thing. When I say tabletop standard, I don't mean three colors in a base painted. I'm talking what I would consider presentable to somebody else. Something I'd sign my name to. So I like to paint a bunch of stuff quickly, like skeletons or zombies or something, and kind of as a palette cleanse from doing this kind of high detail work. These aren't super high details, it's just some of them are in such tiny, like hard to get spaces that it can be a little bit challenging to paint well and still get things done on schedule. One more draw for red. Well, I'm way over schedule. These sandals are kind of crazy too. Like there are just all kinds of little strappies that go everywhere on them. I'm not sure where the straps end. I'm not sure where exactly the bottom part of this shoe is, like which parts belong to which. So it's a little bit tricky to maintain my sanity while all this is going on. This is crazy. Looks like that's about right. And then I'll bring that from behind up to there. Okay, got one. Yeah, that's kind of nuts. And it is really difficult to tell where everything is. And you need to be painted red too. And right there. All right. Next shoe. Okay, I think I got the other sandal too. And black for the rest, or for those straps. I still have any black out there. Yep, I do have a little bit of black. Oh man, okay. Got the straps painted on one shoe. Now, it's kind of weird that painting can be so much mental effort. I don't really know why that is. I think as you start to get into it, there's a certain level of concentration involved that I've seen in a few other things, but generally is not found outside of artistic pursuits. Like if I'm writing a report or a project or something, I'm not concentrating on it this hard. I'm trying to run 10 miles, I'm not really concentrating on it this hard. Different type of energy. And this definitely puts a strain on my back. Like, I get all crunched up. Don't do that. Don't do what I do. Do what I tell you to do. Not what you see me do. Keep touching that spear. Okay. Done. Now, give me some silver. Where did my silver go? Most of the paints that I'm using are Vallejo. The paints that are actual paints, not like contrast or washes and stuff. Most of them are Vallejo, some of them are P3. Started to pick up some AK Interactive, but all this stuff you can get at Game Grid. If you get the Games Workshop ones, be careful opening and closing them. But they do have a pretty decent selection overall. And then for me, personally, when I'm painting weapons, I like to paint the blade silver, and then I like to paint the handle of whatever they're holding black. It seems to be a pretty forgiving color, and it also is something that apparently I use this brush for oil paints, and I still have oils in here that are not dried, so that's going to be a bust. I don't want to find another paintbrush right now, so I'm just going to go back to this super teeny guy, which is not ideal. Takes longer. Oh, oil's mixing. But it'll do. It'll do for right now. Black weapon handles and weapon hafts and stuff tend to not distract from the miniature, and I think they look really clean. It also is kind of very generic. Like it doesn't have to be made out of wood or made out of metal necessarily, but your brain kind of fills in one of those possibilities and makes sense of what's going on, which I like. So in a minute, I'm going to go through and add some dust, and sorry again, I'm pulling this out of the frame. Add some dust and weathering and some more stuff to this model. And then we'll call it good for today, because I still got to fix that mustache face thing that's going on. I don't know what's up with that. Okay, a little bit of that on the other side, a little bit of that right there. And then I missed a spot that needs some silver, so my silver might be dried out. Nope, I got a little bit left. That's all I need. I need the silver to go there. Both sides, please. Perfect. The reason I paint straight silver on there instead of some other color, generally speaking, is I'll go through with a wash and change that color before I'm done. So I need a better look at what's going on here. All these brushes in the way. Let's see if I can see what the heck that is. Haven't used a magnifying glass in a while. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. There is a little piece of metal that's stuck on the side of her nose. And that totally looks like a mustache. The hard part is, I don't know if I can cut it off without messing up the model. Yeah, a little tiny piece of metal. I don't know if it was a miscast or a piece of flash. And then there's paint that's kind of congealed around it, making it a little bit tricky to get to with the knife without cutting into the top of her lip and without cutting into her nose. But we're going to give it a try. And I think as long as I can remove remove that tumor, get most of that mass off, I can probably just paint whatever I cut off. It's not going to look out of place. Okay, I think that looks way better. Sorry for that detour. Let's try it and see. I've got somewhere. Magnifying glass just hanging out down there. Vallejo primer in white. So I'm just going to brush this on, and we'll see. Hopefully everything works. If the primer doesn't work, the brush-on primer has a hard time sticking or whatever, then maybe I'll just use some gouache. I've had some luck painting some similar things before with a gouache, and it's worked out pretty good. Yeah, so she doesn't have like that tumor hanging out on her nose anymore. Trying to get it to dry. Go back in with some more paint. Try not to obscure details, but also, oh, maybe that'll just be a cool scar. I haven't painted scars in a long time, but painting scars is kind of fun. Yeah, maybe that'll be one for scars. Okay, her hair is going to be black. So I'm going to get the black Templar again. Do one spot of that, and that should be more than enough for the hair. I like to do skin first before I do the hair, because it gives me kind of a, like I talked about earlier, it gives me a buffer, like a physical buffer of a spot that I can move the brush to that has some dried paint without moving into the detail of the face. But I'll just be careful. Hopefully that's enough. Kind of thinking it's not going to be enough though. Yep, I just got a slosh of paint on her neck. And man, it looks like she's got earrings. Maybe that's just hair. I'm just going to call that hair in the black. Yep, that's hair. Sweet. Yeah, see right there is the hard part where I wanted to have that buffer of black underneath that kind of Leia bun thing. And then right there. And then right there on the face. Oh dang. And then inside. Okay. We got it. And as soon as that primer is dry, we'll go to wash of one stuff. Skin color. And then this miniature, aside from the base, is going to be done. So in the meantime, I'll take my trusty Nuln oil. So this is just a dark gray wash. It's much thinner than the contrast paints, which is nice because I don't want to apply like a thick coat of anything right now. I just want to go over, so you can see right here on the side of this armor, there's some light spots. There's kind of a light spot right here I'm going to touch up. So I'm just going to hit those real fast, and this is going to darken them without like nuking the color away. But it's going to be just about exactly what I want to get in the recesses here and add just enough color or just enough paint that it preserves my shadows, darkens up some of those shadowy recessed areas, and also covers any spots that I may have missed while painting, because I've been painting a lot of horizontal lines on this one, and yep, I missed another spot right there. Generally speaking, if your paint is wet, you can kind of just touch it and pull the paint away, and it'll come off onto your finger. Sometimes when that doesn't work, but as a general rule, you can do that most of the time. I do it all the time to pull up paint that I slopped into weird spots, as long as it's on the top of the surface. Right there's another thing. Underneath, I want it to be a little bit darker. Right there. I already got that side. Right there, I want it to be a little bit darker. Looks like I accidentally touched that purple, so make that a little bit darker. I don't think there's anywhere else that needs that stuff. Then I'm going to take some of this wash. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of this. Then we'll do the weapon. And I'm just going to blend it right on. Same thing over here. Whoops. Blend the paint on the surface. So that's super dark. And then get some water on the brush and kind of pull it up and away from certain parts that I want to stay a little bit shinier. there's mostly the weapon. Then, let's see, that red, I was going to change that red. I'll get some brown in a minute and tone down that red because it is really bright. So I'm going to trust that that paint on her face is mostly dry, and we'll put a wash over it. If this doesn't do it, then we'll go back over it with some actual skin colors and brighten it up and fix it later on. Oops, I got paint or water on the ferrule. I was running down and mixing with everything else. Yeah, I'm going to add some skin colors here later on. But one wash, one coat is okay, at least to give enough definition for me to go back over and put the rest of this, the actual paints over it. That doesn't look too bad. I'm going to go highlight some of this black using a little bit of silver, some kind of a dark silver, and otherwise I think she's mostly done. Take that skeleton horde and this. Let's see if that does what I want to tone it down. Oh, that looks better. So I'm just going to use the paints that I've already got on the palette. It was Skeleton Horde and Gilliman Flesh. And I'm going to wash those over the red. And I think that's going to give me the actual tone that I want instead of this really more bright and vibrant color that I had applied originally using the straight Flesh Tears red. Yeah, that's much more subdued. That'll be nice. Once it dries, of course. Right now it looks really bright. But it's already drying in some spots. It's going to be awesome. Okay. I need some time to paint the base and then to highlight some of that armor just a little bit, and then I'm going to call it done. So thanks for hanging out with me. I did not get nearly as far as I wanted it to be. Too much talking, too much explaining. And then weird things with paint and noses. But sometimes that's about as good as you can hope for. I'm going to try to paint this one tonight too before I go to bed. Time's at 9. I gotta play Destiny for a little bit, but I'll try to get her painted. I want her to be kind of green or have a green hues on her armor. And then, so her tonight, finish her tonight, and maybe paint that other samurai dude, the one with the bow that I showed you originally. Yep, that's got to be tonight. So here's my lineup. Finish her with the base. Get this dude mostly done. He's going to be unicorn also. So I think he's going to have white with purple sleeves. And then paint up her. Okay. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. And paint as much as you can. I'll post pictures of these in the Discord channel as soon as I get them done. Thanks. See ya. Maybe.